Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here in my terminal. I can do this a couple of ways. Basically, and this is in order to add in. Yeah, I'm recording right now. So if I come into so okay, so for instance, if I wanted to do this graphically, I would have to come down to System Tools, and I can add Remove Software here. And if I do that, I could then hunt for the actual package that I'm going for. And what I'm actually going to, or you type in SE Linux, and if you search through this long enough, you would eventually find the actual tool that you're looking for. And the actual graphical tool we're looking for is Policy Core Utils-GUI is the name of it. I'm not going to bother to go through this whole thing like this because I do know the name of it. Policy Core Utils-GUI like this. And there it is. Now I've already installed it, so it's all good, but you guys have not. But since we know what the name of it is, we don't actually have to use the graphical tool. I just want to show you the graphical tool so that you understand how to find a program if you don't know what it's called or what it's named. Does that make sense? So how you would go about that process. That's how you do it graphically, hunting it down. It takes longer to install something graphically and a little bit more headaches, so I prefer to do this command line. But we do need to be root to do this. So let's go ahead and be root. And then this is what you have to do this in order to make any of the servers work, including SSH, FTP, like that on Fedora. So if you want to play with doing that stuff on Fedora, you have to do this first. Otherwise, nothing's going to work. It's going to block your FTP ports. It's going to block everything. So Yum. They also have a new one too, Yum List now instead. Which is kind of interesting. Policy Core Utils. I'll just show you that real quick. -GUI, and it lists all the packages that are part of another package. So in case of something like NFS, you were to do this on NFS, for instance, like NFS Utils, -utils, something like that, you're actually going to get a list of, well, okay, let's see if there's something more interesting. Like for instance, let's try YPserve, for instance. Oh well, it lists the packages and stuff, including everything else that needs to be installed with it. In my case, I've installed all this stuff, so it doesn't have much to do. But if you didn't have that there, then it would list all the packages that would need to be installed along with the main one, if you will. So I thought that was pretty cool, and not seen that before. But all right, so we go down here, and you would run this to install it. So this is yum install policy core utils-GUI, no spaces, as you can see here, and then enter, and it's going to download and install it. Once it does, it's going to put it inside your folder here. You don't have to restart. It will put it in your folder. It's going to be under Other, and inside of Other, you'll see where it's installed. It's SE Linux Management. All right. So this is important because SE Linux is more tightly controlling than that of Firewall.
So is it other?
Yeah, applications, other, and then here SE Linux Management. Yeah, and then you're going to set the enforcing mode is going to be set to enforcing, and you need to set to disabled. Otherwise, it's not going to let anything through. The book talks about setting things to permissive. You can set to permissive, but the only problem is it's going to block your servers from working. And then you have to temporarily disable it for permissive in order for your server to work. I'm not kidding you. So essentially, you're going to be disabling it temporarily. I'm just disabling it, period, so I don't have to worry about it. So that's how you do it. You set to disabled like this, and you're going to click the X button, and now it's set. Okay. Now you also have to open up your firewall. It's also under Applications Other. You think it'd be under System Tools, but it's not. You go to Firewall here, and you're going to say Close, and then you're going to put in your password. Now yours is going to be enabled unless you told it otherwise, so I'll have a little thing where it says Disabled here in red. If you click Disabled, it will disable it. But what you'll notice here is, like, say if I were to enable this thing, check it out. All the ports are closed by default on this firewall, including, but not limited to, FTP, and the only one that is open ever is SSH. Otherwise, all other ports are closed. So if you're going to try to do your FTP or SSH on, well, if you try to do SSH, it would work, but well, not with SE Linux running. So no, it wouldn't. You had to have disabled SE Linux. You had to have installed that tool to get it, unless you know command line how to disable it. But essentially, you would have to have the ports open for FTP or any other server in order for it to work. I did go around and help some people open up these ports, wherever, last week, and we did get FTP working, but we did have to shut down SE Linux, and we did have to, open the ports on the firewall in order to make it happen. Otherwise, your servers will not work on it. Okay, is that cool for everybody? That's how you go. For you guys, I don't even want to deal with it right now. You can sit there and open up the ports. My problem usually is that people forget to open the ports, and then they get frustrated, and it causes a lot. Yeah, every time you launch a new server, you would come in and open a port. Like, for instance, I want to do FTP. I would come in here and select FTP. It's a good practice, but when people are just trying to learn this stuff, I'm more on the side of just have you guys learn how to get it working, and then we worry about firewalls afterwards. Because then once you know how to make things work or whatever, it's a lot easier to troubleshoot a firewall problem than if you already know how to do all your stuff, than if you aren't knowing what you're doing. And it just compounds the number of problems you can have and the reasons why something would fail to work. And usually 90-something% of the time, why people don't have their server working is because of the firewall. And they get very frustrated, and it's almost always the firewall in SE Linux that's blocking it. So, but if you were to leave it enabled, this is what you would do every single time. And there you go. But for you guys, I really just prefer you just disabled it and then apply it like that, and then don't have to worry about it, because basically all the ports are open. Now, in a real production scenario, you would not want to disable your firewall. That'd be a very stupid thing to do. Okay, it's a very bad idea. You do want the firewall there because it is a security measure. But for the purposes of learning the servers, I would prefer not to have something to block your servers from working in place until you're familiar with how to make servers work, if that makes sense. So that's my reasoning for it. This is not a good policy for having a server running, as far as that goes. But for learning it, I think it is a good policy as far as that goes. All right. So, anyways, that is how you do your setup here for the whole, basically the whole firewall and SE Linux. And now you're ready to do networking. So now you can make your FTP server run and work, and now you can make your SSH run on Fedora. Now, again, we're going to be using CentOS for now because of all the changes that they've had. And we have to get time to work with those changes. But essentially, just to show you kind of what it's like for doing NFS. Of course, this isn't going to totally work, just about, but not quite. Inside of Fedora, you'll get an idea of it. And this is going to be completely command line for everything. Just expect that because essentially, and of course, I would have it in the right spot and then have it move on me. But basically, let's see here, 1 second. There we are. It flipped on me. But does anybody have any questions on any of this so far, or is this making sense? Making sense so far? All right, so I'll have that as a video there. Hold on, I'm sorry. I had it on the right page, and then everything just suddenly went to the wrong page. It flipped on me before I had a chance to mark it. Alrighty. Alrighty. So, yeah, I looked at that one, and then I need to do. There it is. I did have it in the right place. Okay. So what I just did a second ago was, if you're interested in looking on, it's on page 150. Really, the tutorial starts on page 148, but in all actuality, flipping over to where the solutions are is where the real tutorial is. If you do your yum install NFS utilities, which I just did a second ago, it'll go through the setup here, and then you would need to do, no, you have to be in root, so you do have to do the su space dash dash. There's also a way to set up sudo, like I was doing in Ubuntu, inside of Red Hat, and I'll probably go over that later on. Not today, but another day I'm going to go over how to do that, how to set that up. You have to go in and hand edit a file and then reboot, not reboot, but restart a process on the command line to get it going. And then you can actually sudo into and give the permissions to a particular user account on the system, and then you can have sudo instead of just doing su dash dash. So there's a way to do that, and sudo is a better method than su dash dash. It's more secure, so it is a better way of doing this. But anyways, so if I do system here and then space and enable, and this sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, and I say NFS, and here basically this is a good example of, yes, the I'm sorry, I need to do the CTL here for control, system control. And it says unit name NFS is not a valid unit name, cannot install unit NFS invalid argument. So it doesn't work for NFS. This does work for some of the other servers on here, but using the system control from the tutorial here doesn't work. Yeah, this is Red Hat Fedora 15, just like the book thing here is. Doesn't work. No, because CentOS doesn't use this along with anyone else. This is specific to Red Hat, the system CTL, and they changed this for every release of Fedora here. So what works in 15 doesn't work in 16 on this, and what works in 16 doesn't work in 17, I think. So I know for a fact 15 and 16 do not match because I looked it up online. So what I'm showing you only works for 15 for the parts that does work. And then I'm going to later on show you guys just how to do it in 17. We're not going to worry about 15 because 15 is about to be discontinued in the next release of 18 once it comes out, which they're currently working on. So for that reason, huh? Yeah, but only they'll have a couple of releases a year. Yeah, for Fedora, they'll get a couple of releases a year. So it's just frustrating. But anyways, so one of the things they want to do is they wanted to set it up to where we went in and edit the file. Now they don't say how to do this in the tutorial, but I'll show you how to do it. Essentially, you cd into etc, which is your configuration files folder, right? And then you're going to vim your file for your basically you're doing your text editing for your configuration file here, and this would be your export fs file like this. I'm sorry, that's the command. I'm being an idiot. Hold on one second. It's just exports for the file. Exports is the file for. I need to put vim in front of it. Exports is your file for your setup here. Now, something I want to point out here is that you can put in, not you can, you have to put in the computer that you're using for your hosts that you want to access it now. This is specific to Red Hat Fedora. This isn't the case with normal NFS, okay? You must put this in here. It will not work otherwise. They have stopped it and blocked it from working. So the configuration file for what you have to have in it is different now for Red Hat only. And we can't use Webmin for doing this anymore because they went non-standard. So you literally have to come in here and you have to know what the syntax is. You do have to put parentheses around it or it will not work. You do have to put the name against the parentheses. You do have to put your different options like this. Good idea to put sync. In this case, if I have localhost here, only localhost would be able to access it, which would be this computer and no one else. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. One of the other things I did was put a star. Star means everything. Like that. Okay, so that means everyone. I can also do IP ranges too. So for instance, I could do 192.168.122.0/24, and so this will do a whole range of IP addresses that are on the private virtual network here. Yeah, whatever. And so as this is just a for instance here, and this will allow you to have different virtual machines connect on the virtual network inside of VMware. So you can have multiple VMwares running and connect to it and whatever. This would let you have that virtual private network connections only and nothing else outside of that. That would be an example of it right there. But if you put a star, you get everyone to access it. So, but if you want to limit it to a certain range, wherever on your network or whatnot, you can do that in here. Does that make sense? So that's how you set up your IP address ranges and limit it to a particular one. So of course it doesn't really make sense to put localhost here. No matter what I put here, it's not going to give me permission anyway, so whatever. But I believe so. Yeah. I don't think there's another way to do it that I can think of. I think it's pretty much the same way it is for all the servers. We use the slash method. Yeah. Also, you can set up other things in here too, but this is how you would do it. RO would be read only. So, say for instance, I wanted to do, of course, you wouldn't do this, but you can't have two of the same entry. By the way, it's not allowed. So I can't do that because obviously they'd be conflicting, right? But say for instance, I wanted to do the other one instead. So RO cost sync right here. This would be read only, for instance, right there. RO is read only. So Webmin did this for us when I was showing you last week, but now we have to do it all by hand for everything. Fedora. So you have to go into every configuration file and hand edit all of them and set them all correctly. And sometimes this can be a long process. I'm going to show you in it'd be a couple hour process to do it for NIS, for instance, if you know what you're doing. If you're trying to figure it out, it'd probably take like 22 hours to figure it out and set it up, type thing. It's a lot of work to do some of these files. Some of these configuration files, just for a single configuration file, is over 1,000 lines long with options and stuff, and you would have to know them all off the top of your head with the exact syntax and all that stuff. So I'm not a big fan of going through and hand editing all that stuff when I can use a graphical program that will do it quickly for me, but I know what I'm doing type thing. However, with this setup, we don't have that as an option for Fedora here, and because they have broken compatibility with everything, we do have to do everything command line, and we have to do everything hand edited. It's the only way it'll work. So, ta-da. But this is how we would literally do it for read-only. So commenting is great. Use it all the time when you're using your configuration files, and you simply can delete the comment that you want to and then comment the other one out for option. And this way you can enable and disable a whole line of configuration as you feel fit or as you need to do it. Does that make sense, everybody? Alright, so with that, then I'm going to hit the escape key and then I'm going to hit Shift ZZ like that, and it saved it. Then with that, it's not going to work yet because then you would have to type the next command. It's going to be export fs dash and then space dash r. Export fs is going to be where you update the records inside of NFS. Now this does not reboot NFS. It just updates the records to the running server. So we are not restarting the server. Does that make sense? Instead, we're updating records in the server. And we're saying dash R to basically refresh it. Refresh it. Export FS is just going to start it initially. So I do that right there, it actually refreshed it. And so now it's working as far as that goes. And if we want to, we can also restart our NFS. So the way to do that is do system here, this CTL, and then space here, and then we're going to say restart like this. So you notice it has a totally different way of doing this altogether here. You can say NFS dot here service, just like that. It's a dot service. Now this changes depending on which distribution of Fedora you have, which release number. It's totally different on 16 than it is on 15. On 15 it's just NFS.service. It is not this way on 16. Alright, so right there, it restarted it. Okay, cool. And then beyond that, of course, you would need to mount your share. Of course, it would have to already exist. So you would have had to have gone in and created those folders like we did last week. So you would have to go into, for instance, now they did a smart thing. They did put it into MNT, which is your mount folder, which makes sense to put your mounts in the mount folder. You know what I mean? So putting stuff like NFS server and NFS share make a lot of sense to put inside the MNT folder instead of just in the regular /root folder. And I think that is a better policy, honestly. So I did put one in there. I called it packages for it to be mounted to that location. And the data that I'm mounting to it, and this would be client side for this one here for packages. Client side, it would get mounted to packages. But server side, the one we're mounting in this case from the little tutorial is slash var slash www slash html. This is from your Apache server, right? And then you create a folder called packages, and I gave it a permissions of 777 just to make sure I had all permissions for everything type thing, just no chance for any screw up on it. And I even set the student. Didn't matter what I set it to, it still wouldn't give me permission. But then I created a folder packages and I just put a few files in it, so whatever. They talked about grabbing all the packages from the actual Fedora DVD and putting it in there, but I just threw a couple of files in there for the heck of it, an image and then that webmin file. But whatever you want to throw in there, it doesn't matter. And then basically all I'm doing is I'm mounting the two together. So basically you would come in here at this point, and now that you have this set up more or less, come in here with the good old mount command, and I can say like localhost, for instance, / here, and the one I'm wanting to mount is going to be what, /var /ww/html /packages, and I want to mount it to /mnt /packages. So there's your client and server setup, more or less. Yeah, well, no, the IP address in the book isn't going to work with your virtual machine because that's not your IP address. So, yeah. I was able to make this mount last night. Hold on a second, let me try a different one here real quick. Mount localhost /NFS server /home /student /NFS client. Work just like that. Okay, whatever. So it connected, but the problem is with this, it still won't give me access. So it did mount, it did work, quote unquote, but the problem is we still just don't get access. So I don't know why it's not getting access yet, and I don't really care at the moment because I've just had it at this point, but no access. That mount means that, okay, the way this works with the mount command is that you have a whole bunch of system resources like DVDs and things of this nature, and you're not going to continuously access the DVD drive when there's no DVD in it, and things of that nature. It doesn't make sense to do it. So in order to speed up the system and to save resources and time and effort and computations, they don't try to access something that's not there. So mounting says, hey, operating system, I'm here, use me. So that's what the mount command does.
Okay, so when a device is unmounted, I guess you're saving resources, system time, because
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The operating system isn't regularly going out and checking to see if the device
Correct.
is being used.
Yes, the operating system is not continuously going out to the devices and checking to see if they're being used or not, because that's just a big, huge waste. Think of how long it took to access a floppy back when, you know what I mean, for a 3.5 inch. It takes way too long, right? Imagine doing that every second or whatever. It'd be continuously computing, and it'd be just a big, huge waste of time. Everything take forever to process. So you don't, just how long does it take to access a CD or DVD? It has to spin up, it has to get going. I mean, so you don't want to do that. Same thing here. We're using the same system for mounting devices or whatever, but we're just using it with networking for servers with a file system. Does that make sense? So when you mount, it's actually going and making the internet connectivity and logging in and all that stuff and underneath the hood seamlessly. All right. Yeah, but that's what you have to set up to do that. And that's what the auto FS was about for your auto mounting. Remember, we set up the icon. They actually have a tutorial on here on how to do that. And then when you set up auto mounting, it's really slick because then you can have it to where they double click it and it does mount or whatever. The mount command is a good testing method of doing this. Now, yes, you could come in and type it in every time, but you'd have to be the root privileged user to do it. So of course this doesn't make sense from a end user standpoint. It does make sense to use this as your testing mechanism as a server administrator. So you always use mount to test the things out, and then to actually establish it and implement it, you're either going to do one of two things. You're going to put it in the fs tab file, which is your file system table file inside the etc folder, or and then it mounts when you boot up. Again, the problem with that is that, hey, what happens if the server's not up? All the computers hang and they don't boot because of that, right? So auto mounting is the best idea, and then you could set that up instead. And then when they double click on it, then it goes and makes that internet connection, or network connection anyways. Could be across the internet, but makes that network connection and connects to the server at that point. And it doesn't stop the computer, since it is auto mounting and only mounting on the fly. It doesn't prevent the computer from booting up. So that's the most ideal method. And then they just right click on it to unmount it, just like they would a CD or DVD, or actually more like a USB hard drive that you plugged into the system. It's the way it acts. Does that make sense, everybody? All right, and an example of how to go about doing that and whatnot is on page 146, assuming it works, which I won't count for much of anything at the moment now. But yeah, page 146 and 147 goes over how to actually make AutoFS work and how to install it and set it up. Yeah. So like, yeah, and I get into this repo thing in case it's not in the repo. So you have to go in here and say like install, and then you have to say, I believe it is dash dash enable here, and you say repo like this equals, and then you have to say Fedora to let it know which one to add to it, and then you're going to say install, and then you're going to say, you have to spell install correctly first, auto fs like that. And then it'll add it to it, and then go through and then download and install if the library package wasn't there ahead of time for that. So it automatically sets that up in there for the repo. And then you can go about and actually enable the stuff, or you do the system here, ctl space here enable, and then space here, and then you're going to say auto fs, and then they want dot service, like so. There, it went on, thankfully, and then you would do system ctl space start space auto dot service, like so, to start it up. Oh, I left off the FS. Yeah, you're right. Jimmy Christmas. There we go. It likes it now. My mistake.
With this one, since we're going back to CentOS, we would put CentOS instead of Fedora.
Oh no, it's going to work completely different for CentOS. It won't work like this at all. This is purely Fedora only type deal. For 15, actually, to be more accurate. And then you go in and you would modify the particular file as it applies to LDAP. So essentially, you would go in to edit. For instance, you would go in here to edit etc like this into that file, and if you ls auto here, let me do it ls with an auto and just do a star here. All right, there we go. Sorry, auto master, auto misc, auto.smb, auto.net, etc. Then you can go in and actually put your entry into here. And so if you cat, like for instance, auto.master, etc., you can see some of the information in here and how that's set up, etc., etc., etc. And then you can also see if you cat your auto.misc file, and you get listings such as this in here. And in here you can then put an entry like star space dash rw space server.example.com/ldap/and% or whatever, if you're going to have it work with theirs for mounting it. But in the case of ours, it would be something different. So we wouldn't do server.example.com. We would do something more like a localhost or bacon server is what we did earlier, for instance, and then slash in whatever directory is we wanted to mount, like for instance NFS server, etc. And then slash ampersand, and then it would mount, that particular one, auto mount it accordingly in the auto mounter. So that's essentially how you go about that. And then you also have to add it to the master one too, where you say like, slash NFS server space slash, where you're gonna have it mount to, which should be slash etc slash. In this case, I did auto.ldap, but we probably do auto. I don't know, NFS server or something like that. I don't know. Whatever you want to have it do. Hopefully that makes sense, but that's basically how you go about that. Any questions, or is it making sense on what? It's a lot more detail in order to do it in Fedora like this because we have no graphical tools to work with since they broke compatibility with everything. So we're going to use CentOS because also I have to teach dual now because of this. Most of your Linux Plus is going to be on CentOS, and the way Linux is done for networking, period, is going to be the way this book is. And this book basically is compatible with CentOS and not Red Hat Fedora. Here, 15. So basically, your book here will work for CentOS, whereas it doesn't work with Red Hat Fedora. So if you're going, none of these commands are in your big book here. You're right, they're not. And so that's what the deal is. So we're going to hit CentOS here, and I'm going to show you how to set up NIS really quickly. There's not even NIS in here on the systemctl, so it's not even possible. Later on, not today, another day, I'll go over LDAP in Fedora and show you how to set that up or whatever. And it's another way of doing it. Instead of NIS, you can use LDAP. Regardless, though, I need to go over some other stuff. And NIS itself can be kind of in-depth. So I'm afraid lectures are going to get more complicated, but thankfully I am making videos on this stuff where you can go over it in the material here. Is this making sense to everybody so far, though? Okay. I know this is a lot of information to take in, and I have no illusions. Most of you will have like no chance of sucking it in as I'm going over it right now. However, we will be hitting all this different stuff, and since it will be videos, you can actually go back over it again.